The following conversation from 1964 was with a spirit called Isaac Watson, who was the son of an 8th century Jewish immigrant from Poland who joined the family business as a young man. The medium was Leslie Flint. He began. I hadn't been anywhere near the earth for about 50 years and have no particular desire to return. Life has become fast and people have no time for one another. There's no time to concern yourself with the things that matter, and everyone seems unsettled. Nobody seems to be happy. Although the poorer classes have a better life with modern conveniences and opportunities, it's vastly different from what I remember of the poorer classes. There was dire poverty, and they had a very rough time. Today, they have more money in their pockets, more leisure, housing, and are better fed. Watson was not the family name, but we changed it for family reasons. We were a Jewish family, and my father was in business. I entered the business when I was 15, and we were very successful. We were of Polish descent. My father came to England in his youth in early 1800. I was brought up in the Jewish faith, but in my 30s I wasn't interested in religion. In fact, I became an atheist and read various books on the subject in the latter years of my life. I didn't want to come back because I'd had enough of your world when I was there. I had an unsuccessful marriage and wasn't a fit man. My health wasn't good and I had a long illness and I was very glad to leave your world. I was not an easy person to get on with, but at the same time, I tried to do the best I could for my work people. I wasn't a bad person, I certainly wasn't a taskmaster, and I tried to give them all the help that I could, in comparison with the vast majority of businesses of my time and people of my position. I treated my people extremely well. Looking back and remembering the dire poverty that there was, particularly in the built-up areas in the big cities such as Leeds and Manchester, today people have better opportunities. Since I've been here, I've changed a lot in my views. I was unhappy on Earth for various reasons. I don't see the sense in coming back. Isaac Watson said that when he passed over, there was a sense of tremendous relief. I was so glad to get away from Earth and out of that body of mine, and away from some of the people that were only just waiting for me to die so that they could get my money. But they were all rather disappointed, I made sure of that. When I arrived here, the first thing I remember was waking up in the garden and my father coming to meet me with his hands outstretched. I thought it was the garden of our old house, but it didn't strike me as odd. It was the most natural thing. He sat down beside me and congratulated me that I'd come through and succeeded. I didn't understand what he was referring to, and then it dawned on me that this was all an unnatural situation. What was I doing in this seat in this particular place, which was really of some 40 years previously in my youth? We often went to the country during the summer months when business permitted, and in the winter too. It was just as if I had come down for a week in the country to my father's place. It struck me as being strange because moments before that I'd been much older and had been lying on a bed for months, suffering with my lungs and chest, having great difficulty with breathing. But here I was breathing as easily as I had done in the old days. My father said, "You're now out of it all." I couldn't help thinking, I can't be dead. How could it be? This place. If it's a new life, how can my father's property be on this side of life? It was all bewildering. He said this house is an exact replica of the old home. Let's visit Mother and Simon. Simon was a young brother who passed in infancy, and when he said Simon, it didn't mean a thing to me. I said, "Who's Simon?" He said, "Simon is your brother. Don't you remember the baby brother who died when you were about 3 years old?" I didn't remember any of this. We walked into the old house where it was exactly the same with the same furniture, statues and mantel shelf. In the drawing room was the piano. It was like going back 50 years and perfectly reproduced. There was my mother, looking very young, as she was when they first met. There was a tall young fellow who looked about 18. It was my brother who died in infancy. I said, "How is it that you have this house? I accept the fact that I am dead and something tremendous has happened, but how is it that one should have one's old house reproduced? Who makes all the furniture and carpets and things?" My father said, "It's not easy to explain. It's something we have earned." I thought, I don't know if I've earned anything in particular. My father was a good man, but a strict man, who was honest and just in many ways, but I couldn't see the justification for all this. My father said, "Your conditions are due to what you were like on earth. Your attitude of mind to others, your efforts on behalf of others, and the way in which you have given yourself to others." I couldn't really say that either my father or myself were particularly generous people. We were sensible, we helped people and were particularly good to our work people. From what I gathered, as you live, that must affect your way of life over here and what reception you have. Evidently, we couldn't have been so bad. My father was very orthodox. I was not an orthodox man, as far as my religion was concerned, but my father was strictly orthodox. But I soon gathered that this orthodox outlook of religion had changed very much, and he was no longer thinking on the old lines. I lived in a very natural, happy way for a time with my people, and our life was like it had been in my youth, in the early years on earth. We had no need for food nor drink. I couldn't understand why I didn't have this desire. I was very fond of food until my illness made it impossible to eat much. The idea of being well but having no desire for food and drink seemed unnatural. I never saw anything in the way of food, and very seldom did one desire to eat or drink anything. When I was young, I had shown a tendency towards music, and my mother encouraged me, and for about 3 years I had lessons. I think my father felt that this was becoming too important in my life, and I was sent away to school, and music was dropped completely. In my later years, I regretted it. I loved going to the opera and hardly ever missed a season at Covent Garden to see the great musicians of my day. Here I seemed to naturally take my music again, and my father encouraged me and was delighted when I started to take an interest again. Once he said, "Would you like to go to a concert?" I was surprised because he had no time for the arts. I was taken to my first concert in a huge building and was surprised at the acoustic properties and sound and a large orchestra of several hundred musicians. Many of the instruments were unfamiliar to me. There were about 20 pianos and many violins. It was the largest orchestra I'd ever seen, and the sound was beyond description. Behind the orchestra was a large wall, which appeared to be made of some sort of substance that gave off a kind of hue in colouring. It seemed to scintillate, and the walls seemed to change according to the music. Sometimes it would be suffused with the palest of colours, and occasionally there would be flashes of brilliant reds and blues and greens and colours which I couldn't describe. The colour had some connection according to the passage of the music that was being played, so as to predict in colour the scene or idea of the music. I went to many concerts and met many great musicians and composers. I've become so immersed in music that it could be one of the reasons why I've never been drawn back to earth. I'm happy with my life in music and do not feel the urge to come back. There must be millions like me, but for some it may be a good thing to return. There are those who have special work to do, who are probably the right people for coming back to communicate, but I've never felt the urge. I think there are people whose task it is to come back to communicate, to do special work for humanity. There are others who do something of real consequence in their own environment. Although I've not been in the habit of coming back to earth, I do know that my efforts in music have been of some help to souls. When we have gone into other planes and given to them our music, it has been a great help to them to raise themselves out of the darkness in which they found themselves. There are many different places. I think it is very wrong for people to assume that theirs is the only world. Yours is only one of many worlds, and there are many different stratas of intelligence and beings. The Earth is one of the lesser progressed worlds. There are many worlds, and the Earth world in comparison is very backward. When you consider the age of your world and the generations of people that have inhabited it, that you are still, at this stage in your evolution, still talking and thinking about war, and are still making war. You have many diseases brought about by man's foolishness and stupidity, yet the Earth world is perhaps one of the most unprogressed worlds in the solar system. You've had great scientific progress, but at the same time, although science may have benefited in some senses, it certainly hasn't brought the world together in mind and spirit. It may have brought you closer together materially, but that's not in itself necessarily such a good thing. If it were to combine the spiritual and the well-being of humanity, then that would be a different matter. I've recently seen in your world the appalling mental conditions, that terrible attitude oneness towards the other, and how irrational you all are, and how self-centered you are, and how the whole world seems to be full of hatred and intolerance. It hasn't learned anything at all. You flatter yourselves that you've progressed, but in some respects it's worse than it's been for centuries. You think nothing of dropping a bomb and wiping out thousands of people at the same time. That evil has become even more powerful on a vaster scale. You see yourselves as civilized human beings, and some see themselves as Christians. To me, you're living in a world which has gone backwards rather than forwards. Until you start thinking about the things of the spirit and the mind, these things must take precedence and be of paramount importance in your lives. The whole world is materialistic, even those who profess to be religious. Most of them are acting and thinking in a hypocritical kind of way. The more I see of your world, the less I like it, and I wouldn't want to come back. If I thought that I could be of any real help in coming, I would, but I can't see what good I can do. Until you really get down to do something of a spiritual nature in such a material world as yours, all the effort seems to be in vain, and I wouldn't want to come back. The world seems to be worse than when I left it. I pity you, and I wouldn't want to go through your world again. I can't think of anything I dislike more.